Hi Jeevan, Jeremy here from Riders and Elephants. Sorry this has taken me so long to get to you, but when I started typing out the answers to your questions, I realized it was going to be quite difficult to get across everything that I wanted to in an email, so I thought I would create a little video here for you, a 5 or 10 minute video, and answer your questions via video, which you'll then be able to share with some of the people that you're working with as well. Thanks for asking the 4 questions you asked. They're really important questions. And they're also really common questions. I get them from a lot of people. And so I thought maybe by creating this video, I'll be able to share this video with everybody else in case they've got a similar question, but just haven't asked it yet. So your first question was, what's the magic logic behind having 36 white cards and 45 black cards? Meaning, why aren't they 45 each, or why isn't there more of them? Well, as you rightly said, there's probably over 1,000 emotions labels in the English language perhaps, but where I started compiling a list of emotions and feeling states that are in this deck was with some research from Philip Shaver, and he's from the University of California, and he did a really interesting study in 1987 on emotion, and that paper is called Emotion Knowledge, Further Exploration of a Prototype Approach. And so I started there, and there's about 137 emotions that he had laid out originally in that piece of work in 1987, and I actually had about 137 cards originally in the deck. But what I realized quite quickly was that was very overwhelming for people, and the whole construct, the whole process behind the deck is to help us whittle down to map out what the most important feelings or emotions are to our people, and what the most important ones we don't want our people to feel. And so by having 137, it became quite an overwhelming process. And so eventually, through testing, through going about 14 different versions of this deck over a couple of years, we ended up with 36 white cards and 45 black cards, just by attrition, by cards that weren't being picked a lot, and cards that I felt, or emotions and feeling states that I felt weren't necessary for the conversation about workplace culture. And there's also less so-called white cards, or less undesirable feeling states, because what I've also realized through my study into emotion and behavior is that as humans, we're naturally hardwired to remember more strongly, more quickly, and more vividly negative things that happen to us in our lives, or negative experiences and the emotions that are attached to those. And so what I didn't want to do is have people linger or focus too long on the negative aspect. And so knowing that we're going to naturally be more drawn to them and remember them more quickly and more vividly, so I ended up with less undesirable feelings in the deck than positive ones, because I'm also a huge fan of positive psychology, and I want the majority of the discussion to be around the so-called desired or pleasant feelings, and hence we've got less unpleasant feelings in the deck. Now, just quickly on the unpleasant and pleasant, the pleasant ones you'll notice are in black, and the unpleasant are in white. And I did that quite deliberately because I wanted people to take a double take or look twice at those and think, oh, that's strange, because normally black's considered bad and white's considered good. And hopefully by mixing the two colours up there normally associated with good and bad, so to speak, it might get people to look at the cards a little bit closer. But on good and bad, originally I was talking about these as good and bad, or desired, undesired and desired. But I got some really interesting feedback, and great and kind feedback from somebody I was working with last year, who said maybe we shouldn't be talking about these emotions as good or bad, or desired and undesired. Maybe they're just emotions, and we need to talk about them as emotions. And it led in nicely to some reading I was doing into emotion, and somebody who I'll not be able to attribute this quote to said that there's nothing that's either good or bad. It's how you think about it that makes it so. And I think that's really important as we go through this, and as you work with your teams, to remind people that there might be something so-called negative or bad on these cards, but how we frame that up in our minds, how we think about them will then dictate how we perceive them, or will turn them into something that's perceived bad. So yeah, there's nothing either good or bad. How we think about it makes it so. Is a really interesting thing to think about as you work with your teams on this. Your second question was, what's the logic on only picking these emotions, because there's so many of them? Well, like I said, I started with Philip Shaver's list. I've then added a whole bunch of my own ones over 6 years of working with companies that I've seen coming up time and time again. So I use 6 years of my own research and experiences working in workplace culture to add those in. And also in the deck of cards, you'll notice somewhere in there's a whole bunch of blank ones where people who go through the deck can add blank or add their own ones in there if there's something missing. And what I ended up doing was, over the 14 different versions over 2 years of testing it, is I took some of the most common ones and added them into the deck. And actually, every time I use it and somebody adds a new one, I go, oh wow, that could be interesting to add in there. But that's how we ended up getting to the 36 white ones and 45 black cards in the deck. Now, your next question was saying the two statements that are in step 5, it's important how people feel. It's important how people don't feel this, but might from time to time, and we absolutely don't want our people to feel. So these two steps here. You said, why do we ask participants to draw out these 2 separate sets of cards instead of only asking them to whittle down or draw out we absolutely don't want our people to feel? Because that's what we're ultimately asking them to do, right? And it is a really good question, but what I realize, when there's so many cards to work through, if you lay out all 36 of these cards on the table and then tell people to pick out their top 5, so the 5 most important, or the 5 ones that we absolutely don't want our people to feel, then through the testing I realized that people were quite overwhelmed by that, and it was very difficult to whittle it down to the top 5 because you're just faced with so many options. And so what I ended up doing was creating 2 categories. It's important how people don't feel this, but they might from time to time, and we absolutely don't want our people to feel this. So because most of these cards could be considered unpleasant or bad, if you wanted to use that type of language, although we're moving away from that language, most of the cards are going to fit in it's important our people don't feel this, because we don't want our people to feel most of these unpleasant feelings. But the key thing is, what we need to do is put them into 2 piles, and the second pile will be we absolutely don't want our people to feel this, which will be the most important things we don't want our people to feel. So we really, 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 really don't want our people to feel these things. They will feel these things just because they're going to feel these in the workplace, and they are going to feel them from time to time. But we absolutely don't want to feel these. So by taking all of those white cards and putting them into 2 piles, you're essentially making a trade-off between it's important they don't feel this, but they might from time to time, and we really, really, really don't want our people to feel these ones. So it's a card sorting exercise to help us whittle down to the top 5 feelings that we absolutely don't want our people to feel. Then your fourth question, another really good question, is what's the difference between the 2 statements in step 2, which is our success relies on our people feeling, and it's important our people feel this. And it's for the same reason as the previous question. When you have 45 cards on a table in front of you, it's very difficult, and I found through the testing it was very difficult for people to whittle it down to their top 5 off the bat, because there's 45 cards in front of them, and how do you judge each one of them? So I designed the process to have 2 categories again to help people consider the cards as they went through them, to eventually whittle them down to our success relies on. The way I talk about the difference of these 2 cards is that it's important how people feel this, because most of these things, once again, we're going to want our people to feel because they're pleasant feelings, right? But our success relies on us feeling are the most important things we want our people to feel. So I say the difference between these are, it's important how people feel this, but we really want our people to feel these things. And by taking all those black cards and sorting them into those two piles, just on gut reaction, so yep, it's important how people feel attentive, yep, it's important how people feel fun-loving, oh, inspired, okay, actually, we really want our people to feel inspired, for instance, okay, so our success relies on our people feeling that, let's put that into that pile. And so, by working the black cards into those two piles, eventually you're going to have a pile of our success relies on our people feeling this, which should be the most important things you want your people to feel at work, which we really want our people to feel at work. And those, from that pile, you create your top 5. So, they are complementary. It's just an exercise to whittle them down to the most important, or to the 5 most important. Hope that helps. I'm sure other people might have had these questions over time as well, and feel free to share this video with anybody that you want, and let me know if you've got any more questions. Wonderful. Bye for now.